Recently on the channel, I've begun testing out a pop-up tent from a Korean company that had some really interesting features. Features that I've never seen before on a pop-up tent. While I really like that tent, unfortunately, it was not waterproof. The tent that I'm talking about is from a company known as I Do Gin. It is a large, very interesting tent, and like I mentioned, it's not waterproof. After I put up my last episode concerning that tent, I heard from a viewer named Terry. Terry stated that he had come across a pop-up tent that could be waterproof, and at the same time, it had some interesting features. So I went over to the Decathlon website. I took a look, and what do you know, everyone? Without a doubt, the tent was interesting. So interesting, in fact, that I went ahead, I purchased it, I brought it out here to Lone Wolf Mountain, I did one trip in it, and now I'm going to share with you all my thoughts concerning this tent. I have to be honest, I do not like this tent. In fact, it's one of the poorest design tents that I've used in a really long time. Let's just go ahead and get this out of the way. I do not like this tent. Yes, it's waterproof, but there's so much wrong with this tent. There's so much that just doesn't make sense. I just have no idea what the company was thinking. The tent that I'm talking about is what the company refers to as the 2-second fresh and black 3-person tent. My name is Luke. This is the TOGR review. Thank you very much for tuning in. Everyone, let's get to it. Let's get started. To start off, let's just go ahead, let's set up the tent, let's talk about it, and then we'll go over the components that you receive when you purchase this tent. One thing that I want you to focus on here, as I set this up, is the fact that the company calls this the 2 seconds 3-person tent. The company's super proud of this. In fact, they print it on the storage bag, and they also print it on the tent itself. Keep this aspect in mind as I set up this tent. So here you have it, folks. This is the fresh and black 2 seconds 3-person tent. Let's focus on the 2-second part. This aspect is a complete lie. There's nothing about this tent that sets up in 2 seconds. I mean, plain and simple, it's a lie. The company states this on their website. They state the same thing on the storage bag. They print it on the side of the tent. 2 seconds 3. It's a 2-second setup tent for 3 people. But the thing is, it takes minutes to set up this tent. And Decathlon knows it. If you scroll down on their website for this tent, it says that it takes minutes to set up this tent. But yet they call it the 2-second tent. In other words, the company is just flat out lying. Anyways, moving past that point for now. This is the 3-person pop-up tent from Decathlon. If you purchase this tent, you get the storage bag. You get the tent. You receive 9 tent stakes and 3 guy lines. Right here we have the front door to the tent. And I'll go ahead and zip this closed so you can see what it looks like. Here's the front door. This door here is problematic because of this lip. When the door is shut, you have to lean in and go around. So if you have any sort of like back problems, or maybe if you're not the most stable on your feet, you need to be careful with this tent. In fact, I would recommend something else, because to unzip this, you really do have to bend over and lean forward. So again, if you have any sort of issues, don't get this tent. Luckily, when the tent door is open, you don't have to worry about that, because you could just step on the inside and unzip. Coming around to the side here, I want you all to focus on this vent. This is a very interesting aspect to this tent. So you have this vent here, which can be sealed down, or you can tie it to the guy lines here to have it open, or you can roll it up. You may be thinking to yourself, wow, that's impressive. This tent has a lot of ventilation because you have vents on both sides and also a vent on the other side. But that's not true, and I'll explain why in just a minute. Here's the vent that I just mentioned. We have the guy line placement here, which you can stake out. Going down to the bottom here, we have another lip. Now on the inside of this lip, we have the tent inner. That's right, folks. This is a double wall tent, whereas most pop-up tents are single walled. You know, folks, I can't say I have ever seen before a double walled pop-up tent. I mean, 99.9% of pop-up tents, they are single walled. This one here is double walled. You know, the thing is this, everybody. It really does this tent no favors at all. There's very few benefits to having a double-walled pop-up tent. It just does not make sense for many reasons. Let's just go ahead, go on the inside and check it out because it's about to make a lot of sense. And you're going to see why I really dislike this tent. This is the entryway for the tent inner. With this inner here, we have a section of mesh here and the rest of this is covered in fabric. We have two-way zippers and the door can be rolled back and stowed out of the way. When you're inside of this tent, it becomes apparently clear that with this inner, it's fabric. 95% of it's fabric. Very little of this is actually mesh, and that creates a lot of problems for this tent. You only have two sections of mesh. One little piece up here at the door, and another small piece at the very back. The rest of this tent is fabric. Now, it may look like mesh on the sides, but that's not the case. It's very thin fabric. You will notice that on all sides of this tent, besides the door, we have zippers. With these zippers, they open up so that you can get some airflow inside of this tent. But guess what? There's no mesh to stop bugs from getting inside of this tent. So on a buggy night, you can't use these. That is useless. Up here at the top of the tent, we have a hook for hanging. On the sides, we have mesh pockets. We also have this blue cord. This is very interesting because you can pull on this and it will open up the back side of the tent just a little bit. Let's take a look again at these vents here, so you can see what I'm talking about. So you can see just how worthless these are. This isn't mesh, this is fabric, and no air comes through this fabric. You can open this up, but then all of a sudden, bugs come in. Being outside of this tent now is the best thing in the entire world because it is so incredibly hot inside of this tent. And it's so incredibly hot because of that inner, that double wall. That fabric inner does everything that you do not want your summertime tent to do. It blocks wind and airflow from going inside of the tent. It holds in heat. And, interestingly enough, it traps in moisture. Most of the time when it comes to a fabric inner, the moisture passes through the fabric. But in this case, with this tent here, that doesn't happen. The amount of moisture that will build up on that fabric inner is incredible. As far as like condensation goes inside of this tent, it is a real problem. Something else that's a real problem for this tent is something that you all cannot experience, and that's the smell. For some reason, everyone, the inner smells like a bag of garbage, and it's pretty bad. It's fairly strong. The very first night that I used this tent, I set it up, I got inside of it, and I'm like, what is that smell? You know, it's super strong, and it didn't hit me immediately what it was. It was the next day I was talking to Susie and it dawned on me. This smells like a bag of garbage. It's not quite as strong, of course, not like rotten garbage, but there's a garbagey smell that comes from it for some reason. I tell you what, folks, let's take a second and let's go over the stats concerning this tent. Then we'll go back to my impressions and thoughts of this shelter. This is the 3-person version, but know that there are many different versions of this tent, including sizes. There's a 2-person, there's versions of this tent that do not have the fresh and black technology, if you want to call it that. Those that don't have that are less expensive. Unfortunately, with the other pop-up tents from Decathlon, they all feature a double wall, which means they're not suitable for summertime conditions. The issues that I'm having with this tent, you will have with the other models as well. Talking about the Fresh and Black, let me explain what that is. This is a big selling point for Decathlon. It's something they've been pushing with their tents for a long time, and it truly is one of the most worthless of features. It just does not matter in the grand scheme of things. It really doesn't offer the user or the users all that much benefit. The Fresh and Black aspect to this tent and the other models does this. It limits the amount of light that can go inside of the tent. So let's say that you want to hop inside of the tent at noon, you can do so, and it's going to be quite dark inside of the tent. It will not be pitch black, but it's going to be very, very dark indeed. In my opinion, this feature is just about worthless. I do not know who is sleeping in the middle of the day inside of their tent. The company claims that this is a 3-season tent from spring to fall. I have to disagree 100%. Because the company put that fabric inner on the inside, like as a summertime tent, this makes no sense. No sense at all. That fabric inner, again, is blocking airflow. It's holding in heat. It's trapping in moisture. These are things that you do not want. But yet, this tent is going to do it. You have all of these vents, right? But there's no mesh on them, right? So you have to open them up, and then bugs will fill the inside of your tent. I mean, there's just so much wrong with this shelter, folks. It's just mind-blowing. Anyways, everyone, this is the 3-person model. There's also a 2-person model. In my opinion, this is not large enough for 3 people. I mean, that would be a really bad experience, because on the inside of this tent, because of that fabric inner, it takes up so much space. I mean, you can cram 3 people in there, but you're not going to want to do that. 2 people at the most, and that's it. You know, like 2 people and some gear, 2 people, small dog. That's it, folks. When the tent is stored, it is 30.3 inches wide, and it's roughly 5 or 6 inches thick. It really does depend on how much you cinch it down and compress it. Nonetheless, when it's stored, it is fairly large. At the same time, it's also heavy at roughly 10 pounds. When it comes to the setup time, the company claims 2 seconds. That's just a flat out lie. To set this up, it really does take about 5 minutes in total. Basically, you have to pull it out of the storage bag, undo the straps, undo the buckles, then pull it out. From there, you have to stake it out, do the guidelines, do the vents on the sides, and so on. So in general, it takes about 5 minutes to set up. When it comes to the breakdown process, generally speaking, with pop-up tents, it's fairly easy, but that is not the case with this tent here. This tent features one of the most complex breakdown processes that I've ever seen with a pop-up tent, and it takes quite a bit of strength to do it. There's a buckle on the inside of this tent that you have to pull out. You have to connect that buckle, start folding the tent up, snap together some more buckles, and then you have to use quite a bit of strength to basically twist the tent into a figure 8 and then fold it. Again, it is quite complex. It takes quite a bit of strength. Generally speaking, with pop-up tents, they're very easy. You can do them in about 30 seconds, but that's not the case with this tent here. As far as the materials go for this shelter, it is made from basically 100% polyester. The fly is made from polyester, the floor, the inner, and so on. All of it polyester. This tent does feature a rather impressive waterproof rating of 2,000 millimeters, and I can tell you all this tent is very waterproof. Next, we have to talk about price. For 180 bucks, it can be yours. All right, folks, it is time to measure this tent. Let's start with the peak height. In the center of the tent, you're looking at roughly 35.5 inches high. The fabric inner has a tendency to sag down, and it really does take up a ton of space inside of this tent. As far as the width goes of this tent, at the maximum, you're looking at 78 inches, which is 6 feet 4 inches. But because the walls basically come in, you wouldn't want to sleep inside of this being 6'4", because the material would be touching your head and also touching your feet. So realistically speaking, roughly 68 inches, which is 5 feet 8 inches. From the door to the back, 73 inches, which is 6 feet. The company claims that 3 people can fit inside of this tent. And the truth is, 3 very small people I think it makes more sense for like 3 kids inside of this. As far as adults go, you can fit 2 average size individuals in here, but if anyone's exceptionally tall, this is not going to work. And it all goes back to that fabric inner. This fabric inner takes up so much space inside of this tent. I mean, you can see how big this tent is, but when you're on the inside, it's not the same thing. That fabric is taking up so much space. It goes back to what I said before. There's just so much about this tent that does not make any sense. It's almost like it was designed by somebody who had never gone into the outdoors before. There's so many odd features here. There's so many odd decisions. I mean, it just does not make any sense. And with that being said, folks, let me share with you all my thoughts and opinions concerning this tent. And I'm going to break it down into sections. First, let's talk about the pros, right? Because my list of pros is not very long. To start with the pros, the positives, I really do like the looks of this tent. The white material, the black accents, I think it looks sharp. Next, the tent has proven itself to be very, very waterproof. I had this tent out in a knockdown thunderstorm and it did not leak. It really did perform well. At the same time, it proved itself to be rather storm-worthy, not only with rain, but with wind too. During that thunderstorm, it was quite windy, and this tent did not budge. It really did a good job. Next, when it comes to the setup process, in general, it's fairly easy. That takes us over to the cons for this tent. While the setup process is easy, the company claims it takes 2 seconds. That's not true. It's just a flat-out lie. Why call this the 2 seconds 3-person tent? Why print it on the storage bag? Why print that on the tent when there's nothing about this tent that takes 2 seconds to do? Opening up a vent may take less than 2 seconds, but that's about it. I don't know what Decathlon is doing here, but I don't like it. I don't like companies that lie to customers to try to push sales, and that's what this feels like to me, because there's nothing about this tent that is 2 seconds. You can't set it up in 2 seconds. You can't break it down in 2 seconds. The frustrating thing is that the company acknowledges this. On their website for this tent, it states 2-second fresh and black waterproof pop-up tent 3-person. A surprise weekend? ? Our designers have spent time designing the 3-person tent to enable you to pitch it in just minutes. What does this mean? Right? 2-second fresh and black. And then right next to it says that it takes minutes to set up. Decathlon, what is going on here? What are you doing? Is it 2 seconds or is it a few minutes? Which one is it? Because it's not both. To me, that one little bit that I read you, it feels like legal mumbo jumbo. Basically, it feels like the company's like covering their butt. They're going to call this the 2-second tent, but they're going to throw it in there somewhere on the website that it actually takes minutes to set up. I don't like it because plain and simple, it deceives people. Next, the tent has a funky smell to it. For some reason, the inner smells like a bag of garbage. That is, of course, a negative, a con. Then, of course, we have the overall weird design of this tent. As far as pop-up tents go, this is one of the weirdest ones that I've ever seen. Again, I've never seen a pop-up tent with an inner on the inside. Tents with fabric inners have no place in the summertime. Fabric inners were designed for cold weather camping, so there's just a lot about this tent, folks, that makes no sense. And that fabric inner is one of them. I've already spoken about how small this tent is on the inside. It really is more for 2 people or maybe like 3 children. For a 3-person tent, this is actually quite small. And it goes back to that fabric inner because it takes up so much space. The fabric inner, of course, holds in heat, blocks ventilation. There's very little mesh. That means at nighttime when there's a breeze coming through the forest, you're going to feel very, very little of it. Because there's no good airflow inside of this tent and because you have that fabric inner that collects moisture, condensation is a problem, even when you have the front door open with this tent. Again, the tent has plenty of vents, but they're not usable unless you want bugs coming inside of the tent. The fresh and black aspect really is gimmicky. It means nothing to most of us in the outdoor space. Most people are not sleeping inside of their tent during the day. The thing is this, your average backpacking tent, camping tent, is dark enough to relax in. You do not need it to be pitch black. It's not like your average tent is made from a piece of clear plastic where you have the moonlight shining through all night long. So I don't know what the company's thinking as far as the fresh and black goes. They really are hung up on that, but it's very gimmicky and it offers very little to the user. In this episode, I've been very hard on this tent and also on the company, and that's because it's well deserved. I do not state anything that's untrue in my episodes. I give it to you all straight. When there's an issue, I call it out. When a product does something that needs to be praised, I do so. With this tent here, it has so many problems. There's just so much about it that does not make sense. And it's a real shame. I love pop-up tents. But I tell you this, I just about hate this tent here. The one night that I spent out in it was absolutely awful. I was so incredibly uncomfortable. I mean, it was awful, and I don't want to do it again, and I'm not going to. For now, I am done testing out this tent, but I will come back to it in the fall. That's where things get interesting. This is more of a wintertime tent because of that fabric inner. So my question becomes, would it be a good cold weather tent? Maybe, maybe not. There are some issues here that cannot be fixed, such as the moisture building up on the inside on that fabric inner. But for a pop-up tent that's waterproof, that's also warm, for cold weather camping, this could make some sense. When it comes to this shelter, I really am conflicted on whether or not I want to continue testing this out and whether or not I want to continue to support Decathlon. Decathlon is a company that I do like. I've reviewed quite a few products from this company, all that I've purchased, and I've given them a lot of praise over the years. Take the Trek 100 70-liter backpack. It's one of the best backpacks I've ever tested at any price range. It is incredibly smart. It's a great product. But this here, this is bad, really bad. And the company just flat out lies about the 2 seconds nonsense. 2 second what? So let me ask you all that question. Comment down below. Would you continue to support this company with this product being out on the market right now? With the lies? Because that is just a flat out lie. Plain and simple, it's nonsense. There's nothing about this tent that sets up in 2 seconds. You can't do anything with this shelter in 2 seconds, so I don't know. I think there's a chance that this could perform well in the wintertime, in cold conditions, because we have that fabric inner. And that is something that I may come back to in the future. Comment down below and share your thoughts. What do you all think about this tent? And answer this question. Should I get this tent back out in the wintertime and test it out in cool to cold conditions? Because you have to consider, folks, this is a double-walled tent. The majority of double-walled tents that are out on the market today, they're wintertime tents because double-walled tents do not make sense in the summertime. They make sense in the wintertime. Should we use this in the wintertime? Should we test it out? Comment down below. This has been a very long episode, folks, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up now. I do want to say this. This is not the type of episode that I like making. I don't like filming products and just stomping on it nonstop or stomping on the company. But when I have to, I have to. There's a lot about this product that makes no sense. It's poorly designed. There's just marketing nonsense and just flat out lies all over the place concerning it. I mean, they even printed it on the tent. That's so messed up. I don't know. Yeah, it is what it is. If you have enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, hit the thumbs up before you go. I do appreciate it. Folks, I am done. Take care. Strength and honor. Bye for now.